20. It's a special issue. Oh, hold on. Anyway, it's a special issue edited by Anne-Marie Moore and John Law. You can tell from this picture here, is cover page. It titled "On Other Terms Interfering in Social Science English." It's a very interesting volume, and it's open access. So anyone who's interested, I recommend you to check it out online. In this special issue, all contributors are invited to write a paper from other terms that require not to be taken for granted in English. So I wrote this article with Judith Farquhar on to reflect on our recent research on minority nationality medicines in southwestern China. Much to our surprise, writing about this experience has returned us to classical Chinese philosophy. What follows then is both philosophical and ethnographic. But we mostly eschew anthropology and the philosophy of science approaches to the problem of knowledge in Chinese medical words. Philosophical writing in Chinese has helped us as anthropologists better appreciate the knowing practices of the herbalists we have encountered in China's southern mountains. In particular, this writing is inspired by three resources. The Confucian thinking of, and we use this quote, 知之为不知，是知也, as our opening remarks. And of course, it's not just about 知之 and 不知. Later I will discuss 格物致知 and 致良知, Zhu Xi and Wang Yangning. And the second one is Farquhar's conceptualization of knowing practice. And in this original book, she didn't really highlight this concept, but she used it as her title. And she thinks it's already hidden in all the writing and in Chinese philosophy, but I really feel we should highlight this concept. And here I use a quote from in her conclusion in Knowing Practice. And basically she's calling for not putting knowledge and practice in a dialectic relationship because it's an understatement instead. And we should more focus on the relationship. Okay, I still have to do this. Sorry, I have some technical problem.
So you want to turn off the sharing first, or?
Yeah, I need to turn off this thing. It's blocking my view.
Okay.
But I lost my screen. It freezed.一晨，你们现在还是看到屏幕吗？ Still screen?
我能看到是在那个 knowing practice 那个画面。
Okay. It seems my computer. Okay. Now it's fine. I need to work on that. Okay. So anyway, first one is knowing practice. The second one is knowing practice. And as she was saying, the knowing practice is, instead of putting the relationship of knowledge and practice in a dialectical relationship, instead, actually, it's a cultivation of skills. It's a slow development of depthness through the living of clinically useful life. Of course, she's talking about Chinese medicine practice, but I think we also can get inspiration from both our anthropological practice and how we understand the healer's practice. Okay, so the third one is Marisol de la Cadena's Elaboration of Not Knowing. As she wrote in her introduction, he said, she first admit she didn't understand what her informant, Nazario, was talking about. And frequently not knowing was not a question of leaving meaning behind, because for many practices of words, there were no such thing as meaning. Still, she says, The practices were what my friends did, and the words were what they said, but what those practices did or what those words said exactly escaped my knowing. I put these two together, juxtapose both Judith Farquhar and Marisol de la Cadena, is to want to get across. The discussion here today is not just about our research subjects or the healers here, there, knowing and not knowing, also us anthropologists knowing and not knowing, because Marisol was talking about her own not knowing, while Judith Farquhar was talking about the Chinese practitioners, Chinese medicine practitioners knowing practice. So this article reports visits to 3 mountain herbalists, describing the particular ways they practice knowing and use their expertise to treat difficult disorders. On the road through a mostly unknowable world, such Chinese healers expect transformations in both those who know and in what can be known and enacted. This life teaches us how to know not through concepts, but through the irreducible patterning of life. So the first healers is Ghost and Huang. And this is our subtitle. We quote him. He asked, "Do you believe in fate?" What happened was in this our anthropological field research in southern China, we met Dr. Ghost and Huang, a senior practitioner in the Yao Nationality Medicine Hospital. And here I show you this picture is taken from their hospital. They have oncology department. And having been introduced by our research associate, Yang Jian, who was interning with Dr. Huang, we followed him one morning as he began his rounds in the inpatient ward of this 40-bed hospital. He went first to see a 50-year-old patient diagnosed with lymphoma. He told us she had been through 6 rounds of chemotherapy over the past 6 years. Her current main complaint was a terrible ulcer near her left popliteal lymph node, 国关节, 细淋巴结. Dr. Huang examined the open sore closely, then he left. Yang Jian told us that he was going downstairs to prepare a very special herbal paste. She had already said Dr. Huang has been trying to find a certain special herb for this patient for a long time. He had asked almost every herb collector in town, even eventually riding on a motorcycle with one of them so they could get together deep into the mountains, where he himself dug up the precious root. Very curiously, I went with Dr. Huang to see this special drug. He went into his clinic and took out a large tuber that looked rather like a bamboo shoot, as you can tell from the picture. Yang Jian told us later it is a tuber of 七叶一枝花, 7 leaves per flowering stem. We were impressed. This is a famously rare herbal drug. After peeling the tuber, Dr. Huang told me that no metal should be in contact with the tuber as it was prepared. So he first used a knife, but then he put down the knife and picked up a big rock. You can tell from the third picture. And meanwhile, he warned me, step back a little further. He warned me. The herb is poisonous. Then he put on gloves and safety glasses and started to carefully smash and grind the tuber with a big rock. He was trying to make paste as fine as he could. It took quite a while. I was curious, and I asked him, will this freshly made paste put in plaster work for the patient? So Dr. Huang explained to me. He said the ulcer looked like actually what is called in Yao medicine a grievous toxic sore, 大毒疮. And the 7-leaf stem paste was known to be a specific formula for this kind of ulcer. He also noted that he had already tried many different therapies on the patient to see which might work better. Then he smiled and he asked me, do you believe in fate? 你相信命运吗? I was stands there. Sometimes the method that works on one patient will not work on other patients. You have to believe in fate, ride the waves of personal destiny. Dr. Huang, it would seem, knew what he did not know. In writing this, we see it an opportunity for us to re-explore some of the complex and uncertain terrain in our recent research on minority nationality medical knowledge and practice. New systems of traditional medicine are now emerging with varying amounts of official support in South and Southwestern China. As we have worked, we have increasingly thought of these emergent medicines not as ethnic or nationality, or folk, or vernacular, or indigenous, but as local knowledges. But it's not only knowledge, to quote Marisol de la Cadena, not only, not exactly local. In our book, recently published Gathering Medicines, we have discussed in details at length on localness and local placemaking. So here I just leave this and for you to think about. This travel from afar patient has been through 6-round chemotherapy and now is being treated only by that author on her knee and using this plaster. So let's think again about Dr. Huang and his several ways of knowing. He is a widely respected expert in herbal medicine practiced by Yao nationality doctors in the Great Yao Mountain of northern Guangxi. This is Dayaoshan. He is one of the founders of a modern hospital of Yao medicine, that is the Jinshu Yao Yiyuan, the Yao Medicine Hospital. He supervises junior residents and interns, and sufferers come from afar and wide to receive his treatments. As is evident in the episode described here, he knew that the natural medical resources of his home region better than almost any of his colleagues, and he was known for the many years of clinical experience that informed his therapeutic strategies. He knew the unnamed and trackless places in the great forests near the hospital where that tuber, the 7-leaf stem, might be found growing. He knew his lymphoma patient's sad history. He knew what the visible characteristics of her skin ulcer could tell him about the state of disease process. He knew how this kind of grievous toxic score in Yao medicine Da Du Chuang had been understood and managed by Yao practitioners in the past. He knew how to protect himself, his patient, and bystanders, me, from the toxic fumes of the pounded root. And he worked hard to put his skills and understanding into service as good medicine or healing. But he did not know what would happen in the future. So my question, will this plaster help us for a prognosis or a prediction and imply that there might be a knowable cause and effect chain linking natural drug, bodily lesion, and the progress of lymphoma? To answer such a question, Dr. Huang invoked not knowledge, but belief. He asked me, do you believe in fate? Even if for him and me, Judy too, and possibly you, we all think fate is perfectly real force in our lives. We know that we cannot know our fate. There is nothing definitive or reliable or unalterable about personal fate or destiny, which is why it should not be thought of as knowledge about the future. The word he used for fate or destiny was 命运, which literally means the particular flow of a particular life and death. Fate is a topic for different discussion, but here it can be seen that fate is closely allied to ways of knowing anything. As stated above, Dr. Huang was putting several agents into close relationship with each other. The forest plant, the meshed root fibers, the gauze-wrapped plaster, and his own hard labor and devoted time. The faded particularity seems to be the relationship among these players and their convergence upon a clinical problem. A therapeutic grouping has been conscientiously gathered. Perhaps as it nears patient body, it will join with her particular destiny and help to redirect the flow of her life so far. But 命运 cannot be known definitely even by skilled diviners. If anything, the practical divide between what can and cannot be known reminds us how many mundane practices of knowing are referred to in the paragraph above. Dr. Huang's knowledge of what has worked medically in the past is here found alongside his craft knowledge of how to control toxins. His experienced diagnostic and therapeutic judgment is noted along with his authoritative reputation. He is known for his expertise. Expertise, like Dr. Huang's, relating to the forest and its natural agents, including toxic and healing. So expertise is far from universal among the residents of villages and towns near his Yao Medical Hospital. Locally, he is a rather unique expert knower. But even health policymakers in Beijing hesitate to dismiss his medical expertise as mere belief, superstition, or folklore. Committed as a modern word may be to knowing translocal information. When faced with a knowing practice that heals in place, both its particular 知之 and 不知 must be respected. Doing ethnographic fieldwork, we found ourselves in that frictional field of medicine, where expertise is not just or even centrally derived from a body of knowledge. Rather, it is a politics, an ethics, practices, ideologies, and more than one ontology. Here we use Marion Streisand's more than one, less than many. And expertise also, as Confucius said, and as Dr. Huang showed us, includes knowing how to cope with not knowing. We hope the Chinese material, both pre-modern and recent, that we briefly introduce in the remainder of this article, will help to address this desire, even if it just leaves us riding the waves of fate with Dr. Ghost and Huang. So the second story is about lasting loyalty to Su. And again, it's a quote from him, he's thinking it up. So lasting loyalty Su was 40 when we met him in his comfortable but isolated farmhouse in Yunnan near Erhai Lake, inside the deep mountain of Jizushan. Both his father and grandfather had practiced in the same dispersed village as herbalists, but he himself took up medicine and herbal treatments only after his father died at the age of 67. It was 6 or 7 years before we met him. His father didn't really teach him, though it was he, the ninth of 11 siblings, who had stayed in the house to care for his parents. As his father was dying, the old man expressed a wish for Su to practice healing. To mark this agreement, Su said he constructed a war-hanging storage system for herbal drugs. I showed part of that here, and this is the pink silk. So as to fulfill his father's death wish by his deathbed, this pink silk had 2 long rows of pockets, each pocket labeled. We asked Dr. Su how he had learned his techniques and the formulas. He said that he thought up. 他就是想出来的. All his methods and medicines. Sometimes, a little bit more explanation is because his father died after he made this pink silk. So his father didn't have any chance to really teach him. So sometimes the solutions to stubborn the therapeutic puzzles would come to him through dreams. He told us. His deceased grandfather or father would visit in the dream and tell him what drugs were good for what complaints. We felt he was speaking not only as a person who was able to learn from the inside, inchuan. He told us he's 晕传的 through encounters with seniors who had passed away. But as a canny observer of his social and natural environment, over the years, his father has been practicing, and since then. Dr. Su was reluctant to share with us many details of his clinical practice. It was important to him that only he, among all his siblings, had been designated as a kind of disciple after death by his father. He had a fated ability, 缘分, that his siblings did not. So again, he's talking about fate or 命运, like Dr. Huang mentioned above. Asked to explain what he meant by 缘分, he argued that healing skill can't be passed on and taken up by just anybody. He really began to sync up medicine when the first patients came to him after his father died. His father had asked him to do something for them, so he began regathering his father's abilities, going out into the forest and up the mountains to find herbs. Lasting loyalty Su showed us his pharmacy. Our research team companions, here maybe show you a little bit. Research team companions from the Academy of Chinese Medicine in Kunming were quite fascinated by this pink silk system. I have to go back to this picture. The system of pockets. They took a lot of pictures, opened pouches to inspect the dried herbal contents, and noted the puzzling labels on the pockets. These labels are sometimes it's just simply women's formula 3, like the picture I showed you to the left, 妇科3. It's up to 妇科6, up to 7. And something just said 良药, cooling drugs, or 野下花, as you can tell from the picture, summer wildflowers. These medicines were challenged to the scientific team, partly because they had been separated from their proper names. So those are just Dr. Su's very own classification system. So so-called proper names, they should be acknowledged by universal botany. Dr. Su said he doesn't know the name of most of things he collects, dries, powders, and uses with patients. And it was not even one plant drug in each pocket, like those 妇科 drugs, but more often carefully crafted mixtures. Dr. Su told us he has an average. This is I just read. Dr. Su told us he has an average of 7 to 8 patients a week. Every summer, he hosts a 3-day feast for the Medicine King, a small shrine to medical sage Sun Simiao. In the picture I showed before, the second one is a shrine to Medicine King, in the middle, the picture in the middle. Sits above the family stove, near a more centered shrine to the God of heaven and earth, and well above a few smaller incense burning spots for female relatives. That's a picture to the right. Many current and former patients bring offerings of food and a little money to the Medicine King feast to support their devotions. Dissatisfied patients treat the whole network of agents centering on Dr. Su's own person as a source of healing efficacy. Do they think of him as a repository of knowledge? Perhaps, but we think they are more likely to see him as a conduit of healing powers over which he, as an individual expert, only has partial control. For us, this visit was an event that hit a cultural wall. How could we anthropologists comprehend the ghostly interlocutors, the mysteriously named herbal drugs, the stubborn chronic disorders brought by sufferers, the animals in the high forests, the devoted network of patients and supporters who visit Dr. Su and Medicine King Sun Simiao? We attempted to see the medical work of grandfather and father Su, lasting loyalty Su, and the Medicine King as working on a continuum, of forms of agency and service to the local people. Bringing a healing tradition into the present, renewed. We know that non-human actors like Sun Simiao are built up in social practice over many years of the exchange of favors and gifts. So are actors like lasting loyalty Su. The herbalists, constructed as healers, with at least the continuing help of his forebearers, the creatures of the forest, grateful patience, and the efficacious presence of the gods. But it is precisely because of this laborious process that we anthropologists, caught up in other networks, participating in other constructions, cannot know how in the world he knows what he puts into play as a healer. Medical anthropology, along with studies of Chinese medicine, has a rather long history of relativizing and localizing knowledge. But we anthropologists have not clearly delineated the place that knowing practices, sometimes known as expertise, occupy in the various social worlds that engage us. In other words, if knowledge is what knowers do, just as science is what scientists do, calling it science, then the living signification of the term knowledge become a ethical, political, ecological, and very practical problem. Here it shall be noted that we cite Confucius not because we are in search of either origins or foundations of shared truths, but because many practitioners of Chinese medicine also find themselves citing Confucius and other early Chinese philosophers as they try to explain what they are up to. We are trying to listen to these explanations. The centrality of some process of knowing to the successful institution of an ethical sociality has long been asserted in Chinese philosophy. The Great Learning, 大学, is one of the Confucian four books to which scholars and thinkers in China have returned for many times, generating tons of commentary and influencing debates far beyond intellectual and ruling circles. Two sentences work as a crucial pivot of the text. Knowing comes from drawing near to things. As things are thus approached, knowledge is attained. 致知在格物，物格而后知止. Here we cannot develop the very Confucian idea, but a careful reading of the Great Learning should persuade you and the good that is imagined to arise from proper knowing practices through a series of self-cultivations is something like achieved consonance with the flow of the Great Way. The Great Learning positions a practice of knowing at the turning point between aspirations to the good and the successful achievement of the good. Here I skip a lot of explanation of the whole 大学之道在明明德，在亲民，在止于至善。So for people who are interested, maybe you can go on reading on your own. And we have noted above that the term usually translated as investigate, 格. Here we use drawing near instead of investigating. So people translate investigating is they think it's literally and contextually better. But we think drawing near is a better translation here. And the things, in question in the original text, from our sources point out, are not external objects, some 东西, perceived by subjects and referred to with words or other mental tools. So actually it does not have this subject-object divide. They are more like the constructed entities we associate with STS epistemology, all the gathered things present at hand, posited by Heidegger. Knowing slippery social things, so this 物 is not objects, they're social things, or matters of concern for that sake, is thus perceived in the text as being more difficult more of a process of self-cultivation and world building than empiricist versions of investigation and cognition would admit. One doesn't come to terms with one's own family, heart, mind, intentions, sincerity, and personhood, all matters of concern in the great learning, through investigations that measure, dissect, sample, represent, depict, conceptualize, or materially test a solid material thing. So we're trying to justify our translation is drawing near instead of investigation. The great learning proposes that we need to cross a few distances, draw near to changing and unreliable things, catching them in the act of becoming manifest. For example, Zhuxi, we are relying on Zhuxi's 及物穷理. The implications of this critical translation of nearing and things are massive. For one thing, the action of drawing near to gathering things is not served as a remote observer stance. The nearing to things that we read of in the original Greek learning is a turn both toward the widest world and toward the deepest self, extending its attention across both inner and outer spaces. To adopt a Latourian language, the things in question are both quasi-subjects and quasi-objects. So the knower ideally would not be even a step away from the things known. Our herbalist friends are experts at drawing near to things. They make their way up into the mountain forests, seeking medicines conceived not as inert objects, but as living and changing partners in healing. Dr. Huang invoked a faded relationship between seven-leaf stem and the patient's illness. Dr. Su insisted that only he and among his many siblings had a faded ability to sync up herbal formulas by drawing near to things in the forest. Their knowing, then, is a rather strenuous practice. So for the sake of time, I will skip the third story. Before that, I should explain a little bit of this. So this is not to say that some Chinese thinkers go back to, oops. Anyone can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I can, my slide that is freeze. Okay, anyway, I just skip that. So here I'm in the section of knowing the patterns throwing the way. This is not to say that some Chinese thinkers did not ask properly epistemological questions. The very centrality of zhi, knowing, and wu, things, in the great learning seems to have demanded that later philosophers fill in a few ontological blanks. Neo-Confucian thinkers Zhuxi and Cheng brothers apparently asked themselves how exactly one gets from nearing things to fully attaining knowing. The answer had to be more cosmological than psychological or cognitive. These philosophers turn to the patterns of things, Li. Most scholars translate Li as principle, but here we translate it as pattern. Pattern because the literal growth of pattern often Li means texture, like Wen Li, right, or grain. So it's a configuration that's inseparable from the materiality of the stuff, which it appears. Also, we use a lot of common language like Li Fa, and in Chinese medicine practice, acupuncture, Li Zhen, Li Qi, Li Xue, and then also some terms. The term Li pattern proposes a world of becoming that can underpin the social, moral, political concern of the great learning. Thoroughly engaging Li, Chong Li, becomes the only way to imagine the efficacy of drawing near to social but not only things. This is not just a technical point that only Song and Ming dynasty historians of ideas need to grapple with. Wang Hui argues that Li Xue was the chief rubric under which much ethical metaphysical thought covering about 6 centuries should be considered. As anthropologists of medicine, we note that terms like geography, physics, physiology, pathology, pharmacology, they still incorporate that resonate old Li pattern that is so very non-empiricist and not even rationalist. Is this patterning resonance heard among Chinese speakers? We have lots of casual evidence that it is, for example, here. We cannot move along the Confucian itineraries of knowing practice and matters of concern that fall under the rubric of Zhi without saying a bit more about Wang Yangming. His 知行合一. Oops. Oops. Seems my slide freezed.
So is the screen freezing or is the PowerPoint freezing?
Screen. I cannot move anything. I don't find my mouse. But it's
maybe maybe just reshare. Maybe let me see if I could help anything. Yeah, I can't.
Maybe I just read through since let's see. Okay. So next slide will be about Wang Yangming, 知行合一 and 致良知. So recalling again the matters of social concern evoked in the Great Learning, Wang Yangming insisted that a humane way of going along together required not a disembodied representation of objects, but the personal and exemplary practice of knowing the good. 致良知. Looking back on our many encounters with working herbalists, we now see that the 2 doctors we have introduced thus far are actually representative of a certain situation of knowing. We hope that through the ethnographic material we introduce in this chapter, readers can appreciate how some knowers we have known go about knowing, and how, like Ghostam Huang and lasting loyalty Su, they live with also not knowing, even as they are widely known for their efforts to know well how to ride the waves of an incalculable fate. Because on that road through a vastly extended and mostly unknowable world, it is presumed that transformations in the itinerant knower take place even as more and more that can be known unfolds before us and within us. I can pause here, although I still have a lot, but I think it can be a conclusion, and maybe I can join on something in the Q&A. Meanwhile, let me work on this freeze.
It's okay for you to stop sharing, or you can't find your mouse.
No, I can't do that. Maybe I have to turn it off.
Maybe it's better that you could, I don't know, like maybe switch off your Zoom and then log in again, if that's okay.
No, the whole thing is free.
So because we hope to, yeah.
I have to force,
maybe you have to just close the software then.
No, I have to force shut down my whole computer.
Yeah, we'll wait for you.
Okay.
Oh wow. Really?
Yes. Otherwise we have to everyone have to staring at my Li slide.
Or you want to use your phone to try log in, and then because we don't need your slide right now, and then we just maybe just talk to you.
Let's see, maybe I can try that.
Maybe try force quitting Zoom, like Control-Alt-Delete just to force quit Zoom without turning off the computer.
Control what?
Control-Alt-Delete.
Control-Alt-Delete. Okay, let me see.
Yeah.
No,
I think it's the computer is freezing. So that's the problem.
Okay, I'll try to find a different one.
Well, since we can still see her and she's not freezing, I just don't know how much time we have for Q&A.
Yeah, we can start.
So yeah, maybe you can start, or yeah, I think it's fine that we stay in Li. I think it's very inspiring slide, and so yeah, I guess people could ask questions accordingly. So the rules for the Q&A is that either you raise your hand, I will just call upon you, and then you ask the question by better turning on your camera, and then just let people know who you are. Or you could also just ask the question in the chat box. Okay, I see Loretta.
Let me go
Please.
grab my phone. Just 1 minute.
Okay. Okay, we'll just wait.
Okay. Am I supposed to see my screen, myself, or because the slide is still on?
Yeah, because I can see you now while you're talking. So I think the thing is that if Professor Lai gets her phone and then she could just turn off the computer, then the slide would just naturally go down. I hope.
Yeah, we could do that, but I just worry more technical problems arise if you switch off and reconnect. It's up to you. It's okay. I can wait.
Yeah, but I think she's already fetching the phone. So let's just take the time to think of questions, and then I think we could just form a queue if you'd like.
And I just found a sort of solution, but everyone has to do it individually. But if you click on view and then there's a swap video and shared screen, it'll minimize the slide and mostly show whoever is on the video.
Okay, so it's like yeah, stealing the screen.
Yeah, so people have to do it on their own individually, but if it makes the slide really tiny and prioritizes the video if people want to do that. So
okay, so I'm trying to share a white screen. Anybody can see the white screen?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah, now I can.
Working.
Yeah.
Okay, then I just stop it. Yeah, I think it's okay right now.
Yeah, now it's good.
So yeah. Let me just call Professor Lai back. Hi, Professor Lai, you're still there? I can't hear you right at the moment, but I think you're trying to say something. Yeah, I think must be the computer. I think for some reasons I saw that Professor Lai was speaking because the microphone is showing some signals, but then can anybody hear her?
No, I can't hear anything.
Oh, that's too bad.
She just texted to say I'm back.
Okay. Yeah. But I can't hear her. I think Professor Lai, did you choose to like join with your audio kind of, choose to join with audio? Because I can't, I see that you're talking, but I can't really hear anything from you, and I can't see you. Or maybe it's safer that you try the computer that you used earlier, and then we just wait till it's relaunched. Because I can't hear anything and can't see anything at the moment.
How about now?
There's some echoes. I think you need to turn off one of the
Okay,
devices.
I'll leave the. Okay, now it's only my phone. Do you hear me?
Yes, that's great. That's perfect.
Ah, too bad.
Okay, so I think can you show the video now? Because I can't really see you at the moment.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm working on it. You know what happened? I turned off my Wi-Fi and now I'm using the cellular data. So it seems my Wi-Fi has some problem, but cellular data should be working.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So yeah, so we will start with Loreta's question. Loreta, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Professor Lai. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Good. Well, thank you very much for the fascinating talk. I have lots of questions, but I'm sure other people too, so I'll leave some time for them. But I'll ask a very quick question. Is you mentioned that your interlocutors often cite like Confucius saying, and I find that kind of stuff fascinating, but I also realize that there's a discrepancy between scholarly reading of Confucius sayings and texts and their knowledge and the lay people, like ordinary people, how they read those things. Can you just elaborate a little bit on the discrepancy between the scholarly reading of Confucius texts and just your interlocutors' reading of them? Thank you.
Yes, of course, and that I sense that because it's also come up very often in my teaching. I've been teaching Chinese worldviews and reading all those Confucius classic texts like Great Learning, 大学. But students kept asking, since I'm an anthropologist, how about ordinary people who's not being trained in this way, like scholarly reading or writing? So one argument could be this is not exactly, of course, the same level of the classic training, such in that fine training, but this kind of way of thinking, maybe you might like to think that way, has been. That's why we're trying to use the concept of patterning, has been immersed deeply rooted in everyday practice or everyday conversation. This is something you have to draw on. It's not like literally from what they are quoting, but how, for example, why I give such extensively those stories of these two doctors. We have three doctors actually. How, for example, Dr. Huang tried so hard to work on that tuber and then just to work on that ulcer. But meanwhile, he's turning to me when I was asking him, do you think it would work? He was basically saying, I don't know, but do you believe in fate? And then there is a patterning. So in a sense, we're kind of inspired by this way of knowing practice and how he's trying to pursue a good effect, a good efficacy, or a good knowledge, 致良知. So we are trying to draw this, like we're not saying, it's not the Dr. Huang told us directly, I have this inspiration from Confucians or from Wang Yangming or from Zhu Xi. It's something already immersed, and it's kind of patterning in people's daily life. It's a patterning in how people approach to the world, and so it's hard. It's hard to. I skipped the last part. We had this argument to say actually this way of thinking of knowing practice for us too, because during our research process we didn't dare to think further, to think about when Dr. Huang turned to me to ask me, do you believe in fate? We didn't dare to think about Su's Yinchuan inherited from his deceased father and grandfather. And then now we are trying to think about, okay, so in a sense, our writing this project, we make no pretense of we already thoroughly comprehending either the medical expertise of Yao, Li Su, or Qiang, those people, or the consensus insights and translations gathered in Confucian and New Confucian tradition of writing. For us, it also a knowing practice. So the way I try to explain, try to feel I get inspired by their practice is, to me, it's also a knowing practice. I don't claim that it is. That's how Dr. Huang was thinking. That's how Dr. Su was thinking. Let's all come along with them to join on both what's going on the ground and the Confucian tradition of writing together to form my own knowing practice. So this is how we approach, and this approach in this article, trying to connect. And meanwhile, we don't claim that it is. That's a fact. But meanwhile, I have to say this is kind of riding the flow with, like I mentioned one part, with Dr. Huang's fate, right? Writing together by observing all his practice, his relationships, his networks, his ethics, his politics, and then trying to get closer to his way of his knowing practice. So this is a rather kind of against the grain approach. It's not like, okay, here we have these three doctors. I know exactly what they're doing. So that's why I lay out this not knowing as foreground. I don't claim I know perfectly, but they inspired me to know in this way.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I think I found some other questions in the chat box. I will just simply read them out. So Hu Fengsong asked, do Western medical clinics in small places have similar characteristics as many diseases cannot be explained, but doctors still treat them? Is it somewhat akin to unprecedented endings? Where is the connection between practice and politics in the stories cited?
Good question, Fengsong. Yes, actually, we admit, and for medicine, for medical practice, all doctors, they have to go into some unknown world, not just Chinese medicine or nationality medicine, also Western medicine, biomedicine. The doctors, they need to explore some unknown world, and but I think the difference from the stories I told is the doctors, they are very consciously and conscientiously aware of it. They are trying hard and doing all that. And exactly maybe because knowing practice has deeply rooted in their expertise. While for Western medicine, I would assume, and most doctors, I don't deny there are doctors also had this way of thinking. They still have this epistemological difference, and this I, as a doctor, I need to grasp this knowledge, and then I can reach to that end. And what an obvious example is ethics, right? For bioethics, and for doctors, the ethical is always ethical concern. It's not a practice. It's not like a come together, ingrained in the practice, in the medical practice. Ethics is something outside. It's something had to be attached to the practice. But for those doctors, there's no such a divide, such a differentiation between ethical and knowing practice ethics. So that can be something different. But of course, I don't deny there are doctors in biomedicine also taking consideration of ethics as part of practice without separating them. So that would be my answer to your question, if I understand you right, Fengsong.
Okay,
since I'm using my
so,
phone, I don't see anything. Okay.
Okay, so I think the other question that Fengsong asked was, is it somewhat akin to unprecedented endings? And where is the connection between practice and politics in the stories cited?
So here politics is something you have to, because it's just one paper. Maybe you should read our book. Politics here, of course, our understanding of politics is broader and microscopic, and not something very obviously the power inequality, things like that. The politics here has a lot. For example, give you an example, the politics between us anthropologists who come from Beijing and Chicago to Jinxiu, to some cosmopolitan scholar went to a local hospital to ask the doctors about his knowledge, right? Here, it also has a politics. And Dr. Huang is turning around to asking me, do you believe in fate? Here is already a very political gesture, if you want to understand in that way. And another politics is how, as a patient who has been through 6 rounds of chemotherapy, who has been under this very hegemonic gaze of biomedicine, coming to him and in search of some alternative, right, Yao medicine, and how he should deal with this patient, and what kind of treatment he need to adopt. That can be a politics too, and it's ingrained with the medical practice, with his knowing practice. It's not separated. So maybe give you these 2 examples, and as explanation of how politics and was that what he said, unprecedented?
Yes, I think the question was, is it somewhat akin, like I guess similar to unprecedented endings?
Oh, not similar. Yeah, that's different issues.
Okay, so then I will turn to Rui Jing's question. So, hi, Professor. Sorry that I missed the first part of your talk, and sorry if I asked something that you have already said. It seems like you were talking about what is common among these doctors in knowing practices of fate. I wonder if there is any differences between them. So Dr. Huang is from Yao group. Does his ethnicity help shaping his knowledge differently?
Right, in a sense, for the sake of the paper, we are trying to write something common in terms of not knowing. That's something common. But of course, since there are 3 stories, then there are differences. For example, Dr. Huang, and he's quite senior. He has been spent all his life in that Yao, in that Jingxiu. Meanwhile, he got his training in Kunming, and also with this Yao tradition, right? And it has a Taoist tradition, has this living in the Dayaoshan, has a lot of knowledge with herbs. That's different from the Li Su doctor, who said actually he said Jizushan, who is in the Baizu area, although he himself is a Li Su guy, and he claimed his knowledge all from his grandfather, father and grandfather in China. So they are rather different. In our book, yes, actually in the beginning I just saying it in the passing about localness and the ethnicity. They are different. In our book, we're trying to argue actually the more we do our research, the more we feel it's about local placemaking and the local practice versus nationality or ethnicity as identity. So that's also something placed here with these doctors. They're in different places and they are close relationship with where they are in different region. The 3rd doctor is a Qiang doctor in Maoxian. So that's another different story. So yes, if go to our book, then we have devoted quite a part about differentiating or discerning the localness with this ethnicity or nationality. Does that answer your question, Rui Jing?
Okay, since I saw that there's no more questions in the chat box, so I may take the opportunity to ask a question myself. So I was wondering, because when I was hearing those doctors sayings, because you focus more on knowing, which is like through philosophical thinkings, patternings of life, even dreams. So I was thinking, where is the body of this knowing process? So I was thinking, because I think in Chinese medicines, the body mind binary is always not that clear, and I was wondering if that's something that we could learn from as well?
Sure. Yes, that's another good question. Since this article is focused on epistemology in a sense, on knowing practice, interrogating the idea of knowledge and practice divide. So we didn't spend much on body, but body is here since they're all doctors, right? And how he work with the Dr. Huang work with the patient, right? And we even see multiple bodies here, because the patient, when she was under chemotherapy, it was about lymphoma, it's about the 淋巴结瘤, 淋巴癌. But the Dr. Huang is focusing on that ulcer. And then in his eyes, this ulcer is the most important part to think about the body. And he's working with that ulcer, the Gaduchong. So it just didn't highlight those idea about how body played in this in these practices. And even thinking about knowing practice, then the doctors, their life, their living is already kind of it's closely related. Here maybe it's too limited to think about this dispersed body. And one Dr. Huang is using that rock to do that paste, to do that tuber, and then that tuber then put on the patient's body. It's already part of the dispersed, right? He is dealing with the paste, and in his mind he is also working with the body. So of course, body is everywhere. We just didn't highlight that. And again, in the book, we have one chapter specifically about body and different medicine, different groups, and Yao or Zhuang or Qiang, they think about the body and how the practice work with the body.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to reading in the book. So I think Liang Chen has a question. So could you turn on your mic and ask it?
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Lai. I appreciate that you have the definition for a new definition for knowledge, which is at the same time ethical, political, ecological, and everything. But I was wondering, like, for your interlocutors, do they have like a unifying, overarching way of conceptualizing this knowledge? Because I was thinking about, like in the African context, the healers, they're mediating between the knowing and the unknowing, and they're dealing with the life forces that permeating both humankind and even the medicine, something like that. I was wondering, do your interlocutors have same unifying conceptualization of everything related to knowledge? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think if you think further about knowing practice, right, and also we try to say 格物致知, and that's drawing near to things, right? And think about your African friends who are doctors, right? And when they're the healers or practitioners, when they're trying to deal with like the Hu Feng Song asked question about unknown world, right? All doctors work with unknown world, and how they approach, how they go further. I think knowing practice is something can be considered as unifying conceptualization to think about clinical practice. And it's always a knowing practice. And it's not separable. And you knowing by practicing and practicing knowing. And meanwhile, as a medicine, that's why ethics is playing here. Because as a doctor, you care about the life, and you care about the good outcome. And then so it's always combined. And the politics, what you decide, right? When it comes a patient with so many complaints, what's the central point? What I decide to intervene first? This is already a politics. right? I have to decide which is the central problem and what I can put it aside. So this always, all this, and you can say more like with all those ecological and how things work together and what's the relationship with each other. So I really think knowing practice is a very useful concept for this and for anthropologists, like when I've answered the first question. And then instead of claiming I know it all, first admit I not knowing, I don't really know, but I'm trying, I'm working together with them. And then it's kind of, because we don't have time, I skipped the last part. And then in our writing, I think it's in a poetic way. It's like we said, other words await us, asking us to attend to the powers and dilemmas in play, in particular networks, the particular things that can be known under local conditions and the stubborn areas of unknowability with which actors always must cope with. So Chen Liang, would that be answering your question? Thinking about the African situation?
I would say 60%. Yeah, but anyway, I'll just ask.
Or maybe you can elaborate more your questions.
I was asking, like, maybe because as what you said, the knowledge kind of approaching, nearing, trial and error, something related to epistemology, something like that. That's the one I take from your answer. But maybe I want to ask, like, when the doctors are practicing this, everything, are they, for example, do they have a cosmology in their mind, and are they handling different agencies from the medicine, from the like the patient, and from something like that?
From the past experience, yes, of course, from their ancestors, right?
Yeah, because in the African context, there's the life force permeating everywhere, and even like in the lineage. So like the vitality is passing from ancestors. So part of the healing practice involved, the summary of the ancestor spirit, something like that, which is ethical. But they have a unifying conceptualization of the world, which is the life forces is permeating, in operation everywhere, something like that. So I was asking.
Oh, I see. That's your question. Sorry. I didn't. I thought you want to say something. Everyone was agreeable. Yes, of course. Like think about Dao, right? That's how everyone was saying the whole world. They're working together and then to all have these forms. So if you are asking about some deep, like Yao specific cosmology, I have to tell you, no, I don't know. And we didn't go that deep. And meanwhile, in our sense is with this such a, how to call it, Yao doesn't have their own language, written language. And then they have already have interaction with the Han Chinese with so long, and also drawing on Ruijing's question, it's not exactly ethnicity, it's about local region. And with all these ideas, publications, prints coming in, that's why we kind of drawing on all those philosophical writings, think it's also shared by them, that kind of worldviews. And then this Dao and 天人合一, those ideas. But if you want to ask the similar thing with Ruijing's about something ethnicity specific, something deep cosmology, I have to say no. Maybe it's required our, and so as anthropologist knowing practice to go further. So far, we find a way to understand how Dr. Huang, Dr. Su, and then the third one we didn't talk about, their effort to work with patients. And in that sense, that's kind of something they shared with this if you want to call it cosmology, this idea of the force can come from the forest, from ancestor, from the family. The third story I didn't tell is the family's willingness for this woman patient to live, because she's already sentenced death by biomedical doctors, is extremely important for this Chang doctor. He told us that's the most important one. The family wants her to live. The family has a very good relationship with each other. That's a deciding force for him, for the doctor, to be able to bring her back to life. And we think that's also work nicely with Chinese worldviews in a sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I think there's one more question, but I'm not sure if that's we have
sorry.
enough time to answer.
Sorry.
So yes.
Sorry, I just want to say it's not a question. I was just guessing if Liang was asking something about this, and I was interested too. So the question has been answered. Thank you.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, great. So yeah, I see there's no more question popping up, and then we are just about time, despite that there are so many technical issues in today's session. So it's very interesting that we are also experiencing some knowledge of not knowing of the technical difficulties. So,
we have to
so
cope
thank
with
you
it.
so much. Yes. So yeah, thank you so much, Professor Lai, for coming and for staying with us for 1.5 hours and sharing this very inspiring talk. And then thank you everyone also for coming today, and then bearing with all those technical dramas that we.
然后也要接受姚属于医生的例子。
Okay. So thank you all.
Okay.
I'll see
Thank you,
you
Yichen.
in our next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.